Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're diving into one of the most influential and, honestly, one of the most controversial ideas in the entire history of language learning. It's a theory that claimed to have found the secret to real fluency, and in doing so, it just completely changed the game.
So let's just jump right in with this question. Have you ever felt that frustrating gap between knowing all the rules of a language and then when it comes time to actually speak, you just freeze? Well, you are not alone. And we're about to explore a pretty radical idea that tried to explain exactly why that happens.
Okay, so picture this. It's the 1970s. A linguist named Krashen takes a hard look at how we'd been teaching languages for decades. You know, all the grammar drills, the memorization, and he came up with a simple but truly revolutionary distinction.
His whole argument was this: we have two totally separate, completely independent ways of getting good at a language. On one side, you've got acquisition. Think of this as the subconscious, natural way. You just sort of absorb a language, kind of like a kid. And on the other side, there's learning, that conscious, rule-based stuff you do in a classroom. Now, according to Krashen, acquisition is the only way we build real spontaneous fluency. It's that gut feeling for what just sounds right. It's the difference between, say, reciting a verb chart and actually knowing what to say when you're in the middle of a great story. It happens when you're focused on the message, not the grammar.
And here's the part that just blew everyone's minds. He claimed these two systems never, ever mix. This is what's called the non-interface position. Krashen was saying that no matter how many times you study a grammar rule in a textbook, it can never, ever transform into that natural, acquired ability to speak fluently.
So, to back up such a bold claim, Krashen didn't just stop there. He built this whole framework of 5 interconnected ideas, or hypotheses. And together, they're supposed to explain how this mysterious process of acquisition actually works.
First up, if learning grammar rules doesn't make you fluent, then what's the point? Well, the monitor hypothesis gives it a really limited job. Your conscious knowledge, that stuff you learned, can only act as a little editor, a monitor, that just polishes up what your acquired system has already produced. It can't generate speech out of thin air.
And this is the brilliant part. It perfectly explains why that conscious knowledge is almost useless in a real conversation. Think about it. To use that little grammar editor in your head, you have to know the rule perfectly, you have to be thinking about grammar instead of the conversation, and you have to have time. How often do all 3 of those things happen at once? Pretty much never.
Next, Krashen brings in psychology. He talks about something called the affective filter. You can think of it like a mental shield. We've all felt this, right? It's that feeling when you're put on the spot and your brain just shuts down. If you're stressed, anxious, or embarrassed, that filter goes way up, and you literally cannot acquire the language, no matter how good the input is. A relaxed, confident learner is an open learner. But the most famous part, the absolute centerpiece of this entire theory, is what he called the input hypothesis. This is where Krashen basically gives us the secret ingredient, the one formula for how all language acquisition is supposed to happen. And it looks so simple, doesn't it? Just I plus 1. But according to Krashen, this tiny little formula represents the one and only thing you need to acquire a second language. This right here is the engine that drives the whole machine.
So let's break it down. I is just your current level, everything you already know in the language, plus all your background knowledge about the world that helps you guess and figure things out. And the plus 1, that's the next little piece of language that you're ready to absorb. So the rule is, we only acquire language when we understand messages that have that plus 1 in them. He called this comprehensible input.
And wow, did this theory take off? It was elegant, it felt intuitive, and it completely upended language teaching. But then, the 1980s came along and other academics started poking holes in it, and they found some pretty big ones. The pushback was, well, it was harsh. Linguists like Kevin Gregg argued the whole model was just fundamentally unscientific. He said the terms were so vague you couldn't even test them. He basically said you shouldn't even be allowed to call it a theory. Ouch. So the big attacks really centered on 3 things. First, how on earth do you measure I or plus 1? You can't, which makes the core idea untestable. Second, is that wall between learning and acquisition really so absolute? And third, and this was a huge one, the model completely ignores the role of actually speaking or writing. It says only input matters. And then came the hard evidence. There were these famous studies on students in French immersion programs in Canada, and they showed that even after years and years of getting tons of comprehensible input, their grammar was still full of errors and wasn't very native-like. So, this basically proved that input, while super important, wasn't enough all by itself.
So you might be thinking, if the theory was so full of holes, why are we even talking about it today? Well, because here's the twist. While the monitor model itself kind of fell apart under all that scrutiny, its core ideas sparked a revolution that shaped everything that came after it.
See, the theories that came next didn't just throw Krashen's ideas in the trash, they built right on top of them. Michael Long's interaction hypothesis, for example, said it's not just about getting input, it's about the back and forth of conversation that helps you understand it. Then, Merrill Swain's output hypothesis argued that the very act of trying to speak or write forces you to notice what you don't know.
And you can really see that whole evolution right here. The entire field moved from Krashen's simple, one-way street of just get input to a much more dynamic, complex picture where input, interaction, and actually producing the language all work together.
And this, right here, is the key takeaway. Krashen's real legacy isn't his 5 hypotheses. It's that he almost single-handedly shifted the entire focus of language education away from boring grammar drills and towards real, meaningful communication. He's the reason a modern language class is probably more about talking than it is about filling out worksheets.
So, let's just end on this final thought. Think about any language you've ever tried to learn. How much of what you can actually do without language came from a rule you memorized in a textbook, and how much of it came from the simple, powerful act of just understanding someone? This revolutionary and, yes, flawed theory really forces us to think about what it actually means to learn.